welcome to Live from My Drum Room. And it's really a huge honor and a gigantic pleasure to welcome one of my oldest and dearest friends. And that is a true fact. Please welcome the great, the mighty Myron Grombacher.
Johnny D.
Mighty Tyrone.
How are you, my friend?
I'm great, my friend. I apologize. I had a lot more to say than I thought I did for the intro.
I took a little nap there. You know, the funny thing about Zoom is when they put you in Zoom limbo, you see, the host will admit you when he's ready. I said, okay. So Zumbo is where I was. That's a new word. I'm not taking all the credit for it, but Zumbo. I'd like to start off by wishing everybody a happy Year of the Rabbit. I just got back from San Francisco. They're partying it up. I, of course, was born the Year of the Dragon. And I'll tell all other dragons that rabbits are pretty much off the menu for 300 and some days. So we're vegetarians for a while.
How's everybody?
Hand puppets. Come on.
Myron,
anything for you, John. Anything.
Buddy, I love you, man. I love you. Oh, you're the best. We got so many folks watching, and I got to tell you, Dave Wasikinen of the Hooters, who I know you remember.
That guy. Yeah, it's a great guy. Great drummer.
Great drummer, great guy. He says hello, and he's been looking forward to this, and tons of people watching because we are live. So. Yeah. And I know you're no stranger to playing live. So
yeah, playing live's fine. Talking is a different deal, So we'll see how this all works out. So question number one.
Well, we got a ton of questions, but I just want to just tell you first of all how much I appreciate you doing this today, because I know you don't do a lot of these. You kind of shy away.
I don't do
come up with. I know you don't. And when I texted you the other day, you were so nice. You said, I said, any chance you'd want to do this? And you said, for you, yes. And I so appreciated that. Thank you.
Yeah. All the love to you, Johnny. We go back a long, long way.
And right back at you, Myron. I tell you this story. I tell all my friends, my drummer friends, this story. You were really the first famous drummer I met when I moved to LA, when I was working at Simmons. And I'm glad I met you first, because, that whole thing about never meet your heroes, and, you hear about these people that meet their heroes and are so disappointed. And you, what you did probably turned me into a monster, because you were so nice. I never hesitated to approach a drummer after that, because you were so great.
And that's so unlike me. I don't know. I think I hit my head that day. I was kind of wandering around in a haze. Vulnerable.
No, you didn't. No. You didn't. I remember instantly digging you so much. I mean, I was such a fan, and what struck me, and it still strikes me today when we get into phone conversations, is how much, at that time, I remember you talking drums with you, and you knew more about drums than guys that work at drum shops. I can't remember exactly, but you were going, well, the thing is, it's when you get this many plies, and you just went into the whole Myron thing. And I'm like, man, this guy knows his shit.
Yeah. I was always, I came to drumming late in my life, but I think I was always a drummer, because I always responded. I remember, I grew up at a time when I was born in the 50s. So the music that was on the radio, for the most part, was nothing that I could embrace, until, later on into the 60s. But every now and then, like Bobby Darin, Beyond the Sea, the drum track on that was phenomenal. And I remember hearing that in my parents' car and going, whoa, yeah, I can listen to this song. But most of them, Pat Boone, Love Letters in the Sand, probably not. That's not going to work for me. But it's funny. I was there when music changed, and I was born at the right time, because the people that I got to listen to as a young person, formulating, my own musical tastes and whatnot. I mean, we had giants. I mean, we had John Coltrane, Giant Steps. We had Miles. Yeah. We had Tony. We had Jimi Hendrix. We had Charlie Watts. We had the Beatles and the Stones. You could just go on and on and on. And it just kept getting better and better and better, and all through the 70s into the 80s and into the 90s. I mean, you saw this amazing, all the way through Nirvana. I mean, amazing musicianship, amazing songwriting, change of direction, pretty awesome. When I look back on my whole life and all the people that I got to see play live, Buddy Rich a number of times, has, whether or not you aspire to be that guy, which I never did, there's no way that isn't so amazingly inspirational, that it actually, you just get so motivated, when you hear one of the greats. I remember hearing Tony for the first time, and it was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? It was just, it just changed the game,
Yeah. Well said, Myron. Well said. I know. I feel like we, those of us that are like of a certain age, I think we wear that as a badge of honor that like we were there when this shit was really happening in real time.
Right.
And that's pretty cool. I mean, it's great. People can look back at that, but like to be there, I'm a couple years behind, but I remember in the 60s, like all these things happening. I remember Jimi Hendrix, like being aware of him and the Doors and these bands that were like breaking ground. And
I got a funny Jimi Hendrix story. When I was young, we had 5 kids and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have very much money at all. And I was with my mother, and she was shopping and she was in Hill's department store. And so what I would do is I would go to the record racks, and just like look at it. So I saw the first Are You Experience album. And I went back to my mother and I said, I got to have this album. She goes, you don't even have a record player. I know, but I need the album. And she bought me that album. And I would take it with me to people that had record players and make the most of it. And some of them didn't get it. And I would make them listen to Are You Experience? And it was like, no, you need to love this song. Okay. Foxy Lady, you need to love this song.
Oh man.
Yeah, but
that explains a lot.
Yeah. And then when I first started playing the first 3 records that I got my first drum set it was a bicycle with a refrigerator on the front. Okay. And it had popsicles in it. So I sold for the whole summer. And I lived in a neighborhood with a lot of hills. So I was in pretty good shape by the end of the summer. So I made, I think, $400. And, I showed my mother, I said, I got $400. I want to get a drum set. And she goes, she took $200. And she goes, okay, if you can get a drum set for $200, you can get a drum set. So there was this place called Ducey Music in Youngstown, Ohio. And I went in there. And the guy that worked there was this guy, Del Sinchak, who was, believe it or not, an accordion player. And he played like in polka bands, right? But he was a great guy. So I saw this Rogers drum set, 2 wings and a biscuit, like 2 12s and a 16,
Yeah.
But it was Champagne Peak Sparkle, and I could live with that. I could do that, So, but it was like $300. And I told him, I only have $200. He goes, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the drum set for $200, but you owe me $100. So whenever you get like $10 or something, come in. And that's how I got my first drum set, but it had a couple zills and cymbals. So the only place I could put it in behind my parents' bedroom, because we had like 5 kids. So 3 boys in one room, 2 girls in another. There wasn't a lot of space, but there was something that would have been a bathroom. They had, had pipes in it to be a bathroom, but they never made it a bathroom. So I put the drums in there, and it was so small that once I put the drums in there, I had to go in and out the window in order to get in. You couldn't open the door. It was like everything was right there. So I did that like over, in the course of about 4 months, I had 3 albums that I were like biblical to me. And they were Disraeli Gears by Cream, first Jimi Hendrix record, and the first Led Zeppelin record. Now, I didn't know that Ginger Baker had 2 bass drums. You know what I mean? and that served me well because, you know, I developed my foot thinking that that's what you do. But everything I played single stroke because I had no, and I knew it didn't sound quite right. I could never figure it out. So I joined my first big rock band. I quit high school. And I'm not encouraging anybody to do this. If you're listening, young people, don't quit high school. But I did. And I joined this band, Freeport. And we're playing in Cincinnati, Ohio, at a place called Reflections. And we loved this place because it sounded great. The PA was great. It was a big room, great lights. But in the middle of the week, we played there for a whole week. But on Wednesday night, they would have a different band, you know, like a big national band. So the guy says, you know, you got to strike your drums down because we have the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I go, orchestra? Anyway, I don't do that, you know, because I don't know, I went out and had fun because I was young. So I wake up the next day, you know, I gotta turn my drums down. So I come in and the guy lets me in, you know, the bar guy, he's, you know, putting beer kegs in or whatever. And I'm tearing my drums down. And there's this bang on the door, but I'm looking around at these giant, I'd never really seen road cases. These giant cases, you know, bang, bang, bang on the door. And I go and I open the door up and there's a guy there wearing Jim Brown's number. Okay. Big, athletic, strong looking dude. Okay. He comes in and he starts, you know, opening the cases and putting the drums up. So I figured, wow, this guy's a roadie. He's in amazing shape, you know, tremendous shape. And he sits down after he gets these Zico's drums, more drums than I'd ever seen, you know, two or three of everything. And sits down and just taps, beam, 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 boom, 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 boom. Whack. And then he goes into what I learned later was vital transformation. It was like, it was a mesmerizing moment, obviously. And I had no idea what was happening. Then all of a sudden, the rest of the band comes in. Pardon, they start doing their sound check. It's amazing. I mean, I'd never heard anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I to this day, there's not a lot like that out there that anyone can hear. But what happens is after the check-in, Billy wants to hear the sound of his drums. So all of a sudden, Jan Hammer and McLaughlin start like arm wrestling. Jan Hammer wins. He sits down on the drums. He's 1,000 times better than I am. You know, not even 100, like 1,000. So I'm like, it was like being dunked in water. It was like being waterboarded. You know what I mean? After the keyboard players and it was just incredible. So I summoned up enough nerve to go up to Billy and I asked him. I said, you know, when you first set your drums up, you did this thing across the drums. I go, that's phenomenal. I go, what is that? He goes, just looks at me. He goes, that's a double circle roll. Okay, next question. And I go, okay, double circle. He goes, yeah, 2 strokes with each hand. And I was looking at me like I got 2 heads, you know what I mean? And you know, I had to walk, you know, I looked the part. And then he goes, you got to get a book called Stick Control by George Lawrence Stone. And I go to him, but I can't read music. But my voice is higher, but I can't read music. And he goes, you don't have to read music. He goes, R-L, R-L. And he turns his back on me. Needless to say, the next day, I'm in there. I said, you got a book called Stick Control and George Lawrence Stone? Guy goes, of course. I go, I guess everybody got the book but me. But I got the book. And then that's what I did. And it did have R-L on it. Now, I didn't get all of the, you know, like the transitions from triplets to whatever. Right. And then later on in life, I figured that out too. But that's where I got the earliest sort of, you know, instruction, you know, or direction. It was from Billy Cobham. Not bad. Right?
Not bad at all, man. Wow. Firsthand. I mean, a lot of us got hip to Billy Cobham from listening to Mahavishnu and going, oh my God, what is that? You know?
Yeah.
But that is an incredible story to see him. Do.
Yeah. And if you see him play, you know how he went across those drums. It was like it was like a force of nature. You know what I mean? It was a tidal wave. It was not even a tidal wave. It was a tsunami. It was more energy, technique, and creative expression than I had ever heard displayed by anybody on any instrument. And then the fact that he was,
exactly. Yeah. And he played with all that power, but still has all that finesse is still to me like,
when he came down, it's from a whisper to a scream. You see that technique doesn't change. Like a great golfer, they don't change the swing. They change the club, and Billy didn't change his technique. He played inside his technique. It's just where he could go on that. Because of his, not only his amazing skills, but his physical prowess was life-changing.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Wow. Great story. And you mentioned at the beginning, you said you started late playing. And I remember that too, you telling me that you started off really as a singer, right? I mean, in terms of music.
That's what I wanted to be. I had great moves. I didn't sing that good. My daughter's an amazing singer, Gigi Grombacher, incredible.
Yes,
but I, on the other hand, I looked cool, and I moved good. But I had more in common with Iggy than I did with Freddie Mercury. You know what I mean? It was, that kind of a voice, But the drummer didn't show up, so I sat down. I was better than the drummer by a lot. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I should do, But, I always felt it inside my body. So to sit down and play it really wasn't that hard, like this thing to me came pretty naturally, I didn't have to think about, playing a beat. I could just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. A natural. And when you mentioned Hendrix, so you, like when you said you didn't have a record player, you knew the songs maybe from hearing them on the radio.
No, I would go over to people's houses and say, hey, dude, I need to borrow your record player for an hour. And I would put the same, I did the lift the needle, drop it on the track, lift the needle, drop it on the track.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Until I had it down. And then I would run home before I forgot.
I just want to jump to this. I'd made a comment when I was making notes, and the first time I saw you play on, I wore this for you, Myron, MTV.
I saw that.
And I think it was maybe Promises in the Dark, one of the early videos, Pat Benatar Band videos. And I remember thinking to myself, and hearing you play too, you reminded me of like a cross between Mitch Mitchell, and I later learned he was a big influence, Mitch Mitchell, and the visual aspect of like Terry, our hero, our friend Terry Bozzio. Like all the cool visual, like you couldn't take your eyes off you. I mean, the shit you were doing behind the drums, no one's ever done that. I mean,
part of it was harder to hit a moving target. I really wasn't that good. so there was no chicken wire at every gig, so I had to just make sure. I didn't want to make it easy for them. No, what's funny is that I didn't pick up on Zappa and Terry until I was living in New York City playing in Derringer, Rick Derringer's band. And I lived on 14th Street, and the Palladium was on 14th Street. And Ron Delsner, who ran the Palladium, liked me, so he would let me in for free to every single concert. And I think it was one of the Halloween concerts that I went, was the first time that I saw Terry. And oh my God. But we had so much in common on a lot of levels. I mean, he had the same, we both had this energy level. You know what I mean? Obviously his technique was far beyond mine, but we both had a way of attacking the drums. That was very physical, and we both move when we play. I mean, the rhythm flows through him the same way the rhythm flows through me. I mean, it's more complex in his instance and mine. Mine's simpler, but there's a similar. We're coming from a similar place, and we're close in age. I think a year or two.
Yeah, I think he's a few years older than you. I think
2 years older. I think. I mean, so we're listening to the same people, as we're growing up. He understanding it better than I. but I mean, both of us, Tony. You could tell we had seen Tony Williams play. Yeah. You know what I mean? You could tell that we had seen Mitch Mitchell. You could tell that we had, listen to Ginger Baker. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You know, the that's in my head forever.
Yeah.
Thanks to him, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I one of the first things I noticed, you know, as I studied the way both of you guys played, was the way you both strike, like you would strike set your cymbals up high. And it was like that way you know, it's just, I remember thinking like, wow, there's a lot of similarities there. And then fast forward to one of the greatest, I think one of your greatest performances was our dear friend Randy Castillo. They had that great benefit for Randy in Hollywood around 20 years ago, right? Early 2000s, maybe?
Yeah.
And you played Manic Depression with the house band and killed it, just completely killed it.
Yeah. I mean, that was because of the Mitch thing. I mean, it never really went away. There's certain, you know, it's funny. When these things go in and they become part of the vocabulary. I don't think first of all, everyone should aspire to be as original as you possibly can. Try to bring something to the party. But how you get on that path is by finding people that inspire you and then trying to dig down deep into what they did. And then more importantly, why did he play that? Of all the things he could have played. You listen, like John Bonham, you know, bum, bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. I mean, he could play it like that. He could have played it like that, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Which is like a Purdy shuffle in his own interpretation, you know. So he heard Bernard Purdy. And as a result of that went in. He thought about that. He said, that's a great idea. I hear this. And he gave us another way of going. Yeah. Same as Jeff McCarver did, you know, drinking from the same fountain, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Coming up with two distinct things, but still, you know, serving that song perfectly. You know, not just playing it because, hey, I got this cool drum beat I'm going to play, you know. No, they listen to that song and they go, I can take this song to the next level by doing this, you know. And it makes people, you know, want to dance, you know, makes you want to move, makes you happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think of some incredible parts you composed, you came up with in all those Pat Benatar songs, and similar, you know, creativity. You know, you were obviously, you know, maybe hearing some influence by somebody, whether, like you say, whether it could have been Terry, could have been Mitch, could have been anybody, but then you take it and make it this whole other thing that was yours. And I'll just say this.
That's what we should aspire to as artists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you should think of yourself as an artist. Maybe it's finger painting. Maybe it's fine design. It's still art. Okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Punk rock is as important to me as jazz music is. You know, I don't differentiate. I mean, The Clash, I love deeply. Miles Davis, I love deeply. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
I remember you telling me at a Pat Benatar gig 30 some odd years ago, you said something like, how did it sound after the show? Because you made some reference. You said, well, I want it to sound like the Clash. I wanted us to sound like you know, and I got it. I got where you're coming from. Yeah.
I mean, we used to call it the PRV factor, punk rock violence factor. You know, like Spider and I would play, and a lot of those songs we cut by ourselves. You know what I mean? Just he and I, you know, and then people would play afterwards because there was a certain thing that happens when him and I play. There's, you know, and our gift is probably our curse because it will happen every time we play. You know what I mean? You will get that sound. You may not always want that sound, but that sound will happen. You know what I mean? You go, okay, that's that sound, you know? And sometimes we didn't want to dilute that. You know, we just wanted to full on this thing. Yeah. It
was all fired up. Is that like a great example of that happening? Because
you know the story won't fire up, right?
I do, but I think you should tell it if it's okay. If you don't mind.
I'm going to tell you. Okay.
All right.
So
okay.
We're pretty much done with the record, and the record company found the song all fired up. And it wasn't a bad song, but it was by an Australian guy, so the references in the song weren't anything that Patty related to lyrically, you know what I mean? So she goes, I think I want to do the song. Tyrone, go home and rewrite the lyrics. I was like, okay, all right, so I'll do that. So I'm there, listening to it over and over again. And I was, I was just at the point, after an album, you're pretty much burnt. And I thought if I had anything to say, I probably said it before. Right now I'm trying to recharge my battery, so I'm trying to draw something. Can't think of anything. I got a blank page in front of me. And so finally, all of a sudden, the hook is that I came up with was, I believe there comes a time when everything just falls in line. We live and learn from our mistakes. The deepest cuts are healed by faith. All fired up. When I had that, boom, everything else came out. Some of the lines that they used, and then Patty came up, when she heard that, she came up with a couple lines. So, we had what we needed. So we go in to cut the track, and we're in Ocean Rock. And I can't get the drum sound, and I'm going, and I listen to my drums, they sound great. And there was this engineer that they brought in, like a young guy, was not the right guy for that band at that time,
Yeah.
And I come in the next day and I run into Paul Lonnie, who's a tremendous engineer and a good friend of mine. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, we're here with the Notion Man. I'm having trouble getting the drum sound. He goes, what? Your drums. He goes, I'll get you drum sound. He walks in literally in 5 minutes. It sounded amazing. Well, that kind of pissed Spider off, because, and one thing led to another. And he and I like brothers, but we get into like a little bit of a tip, but not a big deal. So then we start playing. And I can tell he doesn't want to do this song. You know what I mean? So after about take 5, bum, 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 it's a different song is in my head, and I go, I kind of call him out on it, and he's frustrated and I'm frustrated. And one thing leads to the other, and we go at each other. I mean, we go at each other. So they rip us apart, and I have all this adrenaline in my body, because if I don't kill you in the first 10 minutes, what am I going to do with that, So I just start running, and I'm running down Sunset and I'm taking the thing, and I take like 3 laps till my heart is like normal. And I come walking through the door, and Spider was in there just screwing around with that beat, and I just sit down, boom, and we just start playing. And we do that one take, and that's the record.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything that, we went through cathartically wound up on tape. And even the break where she stopped singing and I do the drum roll, it fell apart. And I just did the drum roll, and we all knew to come in on that chorus thing. It was like a magical moment. And Keith Forsey, who was working with Neil on the record, was like, the look on his face was like, what was that? Because we've been like torturing each other, for 10 takes on this thing with no commitment. And then just to really do that.
That's amazing, man.
But in that band, at that time, it was important that Spider and I were lined up, and normally we were, but, neither one of us wanted to do that song. I got to tell you the truth. We didn't want to do it. But once we said yes, we're committed to it. If I say I'm going to do it, I do it. And so does it.
Well, that tape, what you guys, that's a great story. And what you guys got out of it still holds up.
I know. Every time I hear it, I'm impressed with it. I go, damn, that sounds great. Yeah. And I think the guitar solo is a lot. I'm trying to remember. I think he just started playing, and then later on he put rhythm underneath it, which we would do a lot. He was such an incredible, and still is, an amazing guitar player.
Oh, man.
I mean, like we'd be playing, and he could play lead and rhythm at the same time. I mean, when we were done, just drums and guitar sounded like a tape or a song. I mean, all of our demos sounded like the White Stripes before the White Stripes. It was just guitar and drums and big. We had this a blaster that could record, a big one. And Spider dropped it on the ground. you know, and then when we picked it up, it did something to the compressors and it crunched everything down. And there's a picture of the three of us.
Yeah, that was like 10 years ago when you guys played in Boston.
Oh my God.
One of the anniversary tours. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. So in any case, that's what we did, these really crunchy demos on it. And we would then go in the studio and spend a lot of money trying to get the same time. So there you go.
That's great, man. That's, I mean, there's a bunch of questions I want to get to before we,
sure,
run out of time and you give me the hook on this whole thing. But first of all, I want to say, and many people have commented, and I'm going to speak for a lot of people that have commented about this, but it was so great. And I texted you afterward to say, so great to see you playing in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. And
it was great. Great to have that moment together. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
You sounded great, Myron. And it was just, just knowing you as long as I have it and the history with you and Patty and Neil, it was beautiful to see you guys playing.
And it was great to share that with Chris. I mean, he actually, if you look at it chronologically, I think Chris has been in the band longer than Myron. If you add up all the years, I mean,
yeah.
So it was great to, for both of us to experience that,
Yeah, exactly. Not to leave out Chris Rowell.
Yeah, he was a great drummer. Yeah, great guy. Great drummer. Yeah.
And
you worked you go
at
back
Simmons. Yeah. We worked together at Simmons and he was a great drummer. And he was like, we were in our early 20s, mid 20s.
Right.
He was, everybody's trying to make it and he's trying to make it on the scene. And he gets out there and one thing after another, Kenny Loggins, I think, for quite a while, and Christopher Cross maybe for a bit, and and then
fantastically good all around drummer. I mean, really, I mean, he can play rock and play a bunch of other different styles. He's really good,
and a good dude. And I think he used to sing too. I remember he was in a top 40 band when I met him, and he was a singer, like a good singing drummer.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Okay, get ready, Myron. Lots of comments and questions. A lot of people have asked the same question. Whatever happened to his unique drums that he played throughout the years? And I think he's referring to the Ludwig camo kit that everybody remembers so well.
Right. Well, the camo kit, I loaned to Greg Bissonette. In fact, Greg Bissonette, speaking of Greg Bissonette, has a YouTube channel. And he talks about that very drum set that I loaned him to do a Satriani album. And then subsequently, I kind of sold it to him. I actually gave it to him for what I sold it to him for. But I don't think he has it. But that's the Japanese kit. So I still have that kit.
You have this one, right?
Yeah, right. And in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I played my Viva Las Vegas drum workshop kit because I'm a drum DW endorser for years and years and years. But I did bring out on the left-hand side the 18-inch tom-tom was there from this kit because everybody wanted to see if I still had the kit, so I brought one out.
That was so hip. That was so cool that you did that.
Yeah, it's cool.
That was great.
Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for mentioning Greg's YouTube channel. I mentioned it on the intro, and thanks for a good segue.
Yeah. Well, perfect because he talks about that kit.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to mention, you were the one that introduced me to Greg all those years ago. On a trip into Simmons, you brought Greg with you, and he was this, new young guy, and I want you to meet this guy, Greg Bissonette, good guy. And
what a player.
I remember, and you said something like, you said, he's a thoroughbred. This kid's a thoroughbred. Like, wait till you hear him play.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't wrong about that. Yeah.
No, exactly. And you sort of talked about, well, maybe you didn't. You mentioned playing with Rick Derringer when you were in New York, and someone asked, percussion discussion asked how you went from playing with Rick Derringer to Pat Benatar, how that sort of evolution.
The links there are Mike Chapman, who produces Patty's first record and a couple records later on with us, Invincible most notably, and Neil Giraldo, because I went into Derringer in I think 75, and I was in the band a couple years, and then we were going to change the guitar players, so I wanted Neil in the band, because he and I had been wanting to play together for years. We went all the way back to Cleveland. I met him when I met Neil, I was 18 and he was 15. Okay. So that's how far back we went. And I just, really wanted him in the band, and they brought him in the band, and he played guitar and piano. And coming out of that, we segged into the Benatar Band, and Chapman came up to me in the Mud Club and said, hey, I'm looking for people. And I told him about Neil, and Chip Aldridge was there. And, once they heard Neil, that decision was made, and he wound up being not only the lead guitar player, but the musical director, and the ultimately the producer. He had a lot to say production-wise on everything he played on, because the way he plays lends itself to production. I mean, he's very, his musical knowledge is deep, So chordally, he's got a great background. He plays keyboards. He understands harmonic structures. He understands what to put underneath the vocalist to lift them up. If you study his solos, Promises in the Dark is a great one, because the note she stops on is the note he starts on. Okay. And that there's no accident there. I mean, he just hears that and just takes it to the next level, usually in one or two takes. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That song is such an amazing composition. I again, when I hear that today, 40 years later, it's still like, and I remember playing that in a band and going, God, Myron Grombacher, what a motherfucker making a song like this. Impossible to play. It's impossible to, all those hits, all those accents.
And those single circles at that volume, I got that from Billy. Thank you, Billy.
Yeah, no, crazy great tune, man.
But the Japanese drums are alive and well. I keep certain ones that are sentimental to me. I have there's a Tobacco Sunburst Ludwig kick that I played on Tropico, which is an amazing sounding instrument. So I still have that. There's certain BW kits that I still have, and we'll always have, And then I'm paying storage on all that, so I don't have to face up to it.
Yeah.
My wife asked me from time to time, "Are you still paying storage fees on them?" Yeah. You want me to bring it home and leave it in the living room?
Yeah, I've had that conversation.
Yeah. See, I noticed a new Camco kit. You're starting to run out of real estate there, brother.
I know. I got a bunch. I think I told you this in the other room, but I just got this kit a couple weeks ago, or a little over a week ago. I used it last night on a gig. It sounds ridiculous.
I know they sound great. I haven't. Wow. I don't think I still have my Camcos. I think I got rid of like 30 drum sets and like 100 snare drums like 15 years ago. And I think Camcos went there too. Or they could be buried in the locker. I found, I had an amazing set of Slingerland radio games that I played on the Blues album, and probably not on anything else, with a 28-inch bass drum, 13-inch, a 16-inch, and a 6.5 one-piece maple shell.
Wow.
That are, with the diamond inlays on it. Just an amazing sounding kit. I'll always keep that one. Yeah.
Yes.
And then Dylan stole my Gretschens, pretty much. My son Dylan.
I remember that. You told me that story.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I remember you telling me.
Yeah.
I know. Dylan is Myron's son. And I remember you telling me years ago, you said, I got all these new drums. Dylan wants my old Gretsch, and he only wants to play vintage drums. I'm like, this kid's going somewhere.
Yeah. He's got a set of the jazz cherrywood kit from DW too. And pretty much it's either the vintage Gretschens or that kit. And that's, he's a purist. That's it. Old
that's
cymbals.
Great.
I try to give him stuff. He goes, "Nah, I don't want that." I try to teach him stuff, and it's like, It's funny. It's funny.
Oh, that's great. All right, couple more questions here. I hope I can get to all these. Bob Ruthven had a couple of questions all in here. First of all, he said, great tribute to your old Ludwig Japanese finish kit. We're just talking about when you had the floor tom, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concert. Great to see you playing with Pat and Neil again. Question, how involved were you in what was the history, Patrick Foley, of the design of your camo kit, Japanese Ludwigs, and the all fired up Tama kit?
Okay, 100% involved.
Yeah.
So the Japanese kit was designed by really Jeff Shonas. It was his idea. I think I tweaked a thing here, a thing there, but pretty much Jeff and Pat did that. Yeah. Jeff did that, and Pat executed the design. The Tiger Stripe kit came from a Tiger Stripe shirt that you see me wear on the Precious Time album cover that was given to me by Chris Pollard, who was my road manager in Derringer, and then later on road manager with Patty for a bit. And he actually wore that shirt in Vietnam when he was a Green Beret with the Montyards. So it had a lot of significance to me. As I missed out on the being drafted by the lottery, basically. My lottery number, I was the last year of the draft that it was eligible. My father was a captain in the Army. I had hair down to here. I wasn't going to Canada, you know what I mean? Because, so I was going to Vietnam if they pulled my number, and they didn't. But a lot of my friends went, and a lot of, not so much my friends as older brothers. My brother-in-law, Floyd, he was there, Yeah, but that still resonates with me because that was the time I grew up.
Yeah,
and it's very polemic, I was because my father was a captain in the Army Air Corps during World War II. I had a different view of military people, and I came from Youngstown, Ohio, which is really a small town. Not a lot of people look like me. Very long hair then. And I just walked the night, for years, and then finally I got to New York and I could take a breath.
Yeah, man. Yeah, different times.
Different times.
Yeah. And the last question from Bob is, I like this one. Also, did you incorporate electronics, Simmons, Lindrum, etc., into your sound in the studio? And how did you get the ambient tom sound for the studio out of We Belong, the ambient sound in We Belong?
Here's the deal on We Belong. Tropico was really our arty moment to have, So when we went to do We Belong, Spider had given me a Roland 808 for Christmas, so I set up that pattern with the hand claps, and then I suspended that Ludwig bass drum that I'm referring to, the Tobacco Sunburst kit, in the air off of a big mic stand, hung by a rope. And then on the ground, I had like 30 snare drums upside down in the room, and I beat on Spider's case with a stick on an acoustic guitar case. That's the bass drum, that's the snare drum, and we played it live because, there was no sample then. And so boom, whack, boom, and then that one roll that you hear, which was one take, by the way.
Really gated sound?
Really super gated sound. Inspired obviously by Phil Collins, because when you heard The Intruder, that Peter Gabriel record where he used those symbols of all was just phenomenal. And it was Ludwig, single-headed toms, melodic toms that I had. And just one rolled out, and that was it.
Yeah, what a great swell.
Basically, that was, we had them in a big room, gated heavily, Focusrites, Pultex, the console, good sound.
Yeah, great. You always had great. And you mentioned Keith Olsen. He produced some of the early, like Crimes of Passion?
He did Crimes of Passion, yeah. Yes,
okay.
He's a producer on that. And Precious Time, too, I think, now that I think about it.
Precious,
And I learned a lot working with Keith. He was a great producer, Now he had in the beginning, we kind of butted heads because he went for a real 70s California kind of sound. And I like the big open sound. So
that's not your sound.
Not me. Yeah. But he called me in to do a session. So he had this amazing group of guys, like Bob Glob is a bass player, Alan Pasqua on keyboards.
Ooh.
Trying to remember who, maybe Mike Landau was playing guitar. And normally Mike Baird was his drummer. He was like the guy that he used on things where there weren't a band. And I think Baird was booked or something, so we called me up to do the session. And I'm in there with these guys, and Keith goes, I want less conch. I mean, can you deaden the snare drum up? So I get to tape and I put the tape on the snare drum. So he punches back, and we do a tape. He punches back, and he goes, Tyrone, I want a fatter sound. Could you tape your wallet? And I go, well, if you want a fatter sound, let's use your wallet. And he goes, can I see you in the control room? I go in, and he goes, you can't do that. You can't. These are my guys. I mean, you can't say that to me. I said, well, it's a joke. But that was it. So needless to say, I didn't do a lot of outside sessions with him after that, but he was good.
Oh man, I met him one time. He was producing Night Ranger,
right?
I was friends with Kelly Keagy, and I went to a studio. Too. Yeah, and I forget where the studio was. It wasn't.
Sound City.
It might have been Sound City. Now that I think about it, it would have been the mid '80s.
Yeah, but mid '80s, he's got right by Sound City, right across the way. He had Goodnight LA, which was the studio he built. So it was probably
I think that's what it was.
If it was a new state of the art, that was it.
Yeah. And he, I remember meeting him, Kelly introducing me to him, and he was really funny. He was we were talking about you because he had Crimes of Passion, gold or platinum record on the wall. And he was telling a funny story about Joe Walsh back when Joe was drinking, rating his wine. I guess he had a great wine collection, wine cellar.
Right.
And Joe's drinking like these $300 bottles of, French wine. He's like, what are you doing? But anyway, yeah.
He's fun. Here's another thing. A lot of people didn't know. He was in a band called The Music Machine. Okay. And they had a song, Talk, 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 Talk. And it was fuzz bass. Not me a complication. That song.
Yeah.
But their thing was everybody wore one black glove. So the second day of recording, I went out and bought a black glove. And when he came in, there was one black glove on the console. He went crazy. I never owned up to it. Like, he was like, literally, then he got real paranoid, like he was being stalked or something. So I thought I saw something in there. A guy who had big black hat. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I lit him up a little bit.
Oh my God. That is great. All right, I'm going to jump around a couple of these questions. My friend Steve Ford, what made you choose the drum and cymbal brands that you use?
Okay. Originally, I'm playing the first set that I bought when I was in Derringer. I wasn't getting free drums. I bought a set of Gretschens, okay? And I loved them. And it was a 24, a 13, a 16, and an 18. And they were the ebony wood with rosewood hoops. I thought that made me really cool because I had rosewood hoops.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
Peisty cymbals. And Peisty cymbals purely for two reasons. John Bonham played them. Reason number one. Reason number two, if you broke one and you were playing the 202s, the next one sounded exactly the same. Now, that sounds lame, but I was breaking a lot of stuff because my technique wasn't that good. My velocity was much better than my technique. I'll put it that way. So I hit those things pretty hard. And I didn't always, pull up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I went right through them and you're going to break them. So the next one out of the case on a 2002 would sound the same. Of course, I favored, Formula 602s in the studio and stuff because, obviously a much richer, more varied, individualized sound.
And those were...
I went to Ludwig's. Because John Bucket played it. I mean, that was the sound I liked. I liked a big resonant sound, you know, and I had a 26-inch, 15, 18, 20-inch natural maple wood kit which was the first drum set that I really bought when I was in Freeport, you know, and that was a drum set that I played, which was, you know, and I was pretty much a little, not a Bonham clone, but I was very, very, very influenced by his playing, you know. And subsequently, you know, when I start to endorse that brand, I'm looking for a big drum sound, and I got it. Like when you listen to Shadows of the Night, those songs, Shadows of the Night, I wanted it to sound like timpanis, you know, and they do. You know, they were capable of that much range in the drum. And I was very happy with it. And then what happened is I was on, you know, I'm on the road and I come back and we would get fan mail back then. You know, you get stacks of letters, you know, from kids. And I got a letter from a kid. Yeah, I probably should have said it, but I didn't. And he told me that he had worked like mowing lawns and everything, you know, for 2 years, shoveling snow. He's from the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. And he bought a set of Ludwig drums. And he said, they sound terrible. And they have rivets in the side. And I'm going, what is he talking about? I go, I don't have any rivets in the side of any of my drums. So I go into the guitar center. And I take a look. And sure enough, they have these rivets all down the side of the Cortex, which I was never a fan of anyway. But, you know, they're not even glued properly. And when I'm hitting them, they sound terrible. So I had to fly to Chicago because they wanted to have a meeting with me about endorsement. And I went with Jeff, showed up. And they were coming up on, I think, their 40th anniversary. So I said, listen, I got an idea. Let's stop putting rivets in drums. First of all, it went worse than that. I went into the meeting, and Bill and his dad were there, and a bunch of guys from Sulphur, a bunch of, you know, trumpet players and whatever. Not whatever, but not drummers. I go, first of all, whose great idea was it to put rivets in the drums? And Billy goes, actually, mine, it was Dad's idea. And then things got real quiet. I said, well, okay, let's move on. I said, here's my idea. We come out with a drum set, and we're going to call it the Black Beauty. Reintroduce the Black Beauty snare drum, you know, because they had stopped making it. You know, we'll have a black lacquer kit, you know, no Cortex, no, you know, this is going to be great. So I got home, and everybody said, oh, yeah, it's a great idea. So they actually made me 2 prototypes of the Black Beauty. They sounded really good. I said, I think this is going to work. This is going to be great. Then they send me this mock-up of like a maple shell with like an eagle, sort of. They said it was an eagle. I don't know. It's some kind of a bird in there in walnut. And they decided that that's what they were going to do. And I just went, okay, well, let me hear them. And then I went in and I heard them. And I said, you know, I got to go someplace else, you know, because I can't, you know, I can't endorse something if I know that it's not, they're not getting the drums I'm getting, then I'm not playing the drums. You know, on my DW kit, it's possible for you to get that exact same kit from DW if you want it. I mean, they'll reference the size of the shell. So, you know, but the quality is consistent and, sorry about that, consistent and state of the art and constantly moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to Ludwig back then had stopped, you know, they were regressing, you know, if anything. Yeah. Now it's a much better product. I mean, in the last 10 years, they hit the go switch on the drums again. I hear them now, they sound like Ludwig drums, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so they're making a really fine quality product again. And to, you know, to their benefit, because it's hard to, you know, it's hard to get up off the ground and reinvent yourself and move forward. And they did that by just going back to what they did right, you know, making the shells that they used to make and giving you the same degree of craftsmanship that they were always capable of doing, you know, so they're a great drum now.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yep. That's a great, I knew that story, you know, most of it. And I'm glad you cleared it. And I just want to read you a quick comment from a fellow Ohio friend by the name of Joe Vitale.
Oh, man, one of my favorite drummers. The best drummer from Ohio is Joe Vitale. He was the best of us. Yeah, he still is, bro.
Well, yeah, I love the guy.
And he plays flute. Yeah. He's a monster.
He's a monster. Serious guy. Joe, hello from both of us. Big love to you, buddy. And he said Myron is a great drummer. And where'd it go? Myron is a great drummer and a great old Ohio friend. So, yeah.
Yeah, we go back a long way. I used to see him play. You know what? Believe it or not, we could hear James Gang when we were growing up. I mean, they played a place in Warren, Ohio, which was a Baptist church. And they would play like at 11 or 12 in the afternoon for a couple hours. And then they would play another place. And there was a place called the Gazebo Room. And I used to sneak in behind it was a bowling alley with like a nightclub in the bottom. And I found out that there were steps that led down. If you go through the pins, there's steps that lead down into the Gazebo Room. So I would sneak down in there and listen to the James Gang twice in one day. Joe Vitale was playing in a group called The Choir. And now and again, I would get to see them. And he was remarkable because he was, first of all, he had a road case with his drums inside it. And they lifted the top of the road case off and the whole set was set up. It was phenomenal. And they were all tapped out. Nobody else did that, right? It was amazing.
Right.
I said, what is that? Yeah. He'd be singing and playing amazingly. And then he'd reach over, grab a flute and take a flute solo while he was playing. Yeah.
Don't you love / hate guys like that? That much talent.
Yeah. I mean, you just got to stand in awe of it, because not everybody, like Dave Grohl, you go, wow, Dave Grohl. Amazing. We're lucky to have those guys. I mean, they're inspirational,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. I remember realizing all these records that I was listening to were Joe Vitale and just, so appreciating
the Joe Walsh connection. I mean, the Barnstorm, that was a phenomenal band. I saw them a bunch of times. Yeah. They were great. Kenny Passarelli on bass.
Yeah. And Dave Abruzzese, Pearl Jam drummer, says hello.
Hey, and great drummer too.
Big fan of yours. Yeah, great drummer. Yeah. All right. So John Chris Peters says your drum sound was phenomenal in that area. And he says, why? Was it your tuning, equipment, engineering, or just plain luck of circumstances?
Yeah. Well, you make your own luck, So that's what the luck works.
Yeah, I don't think there's any luck involved.
You got to work your ass off and then get lucky. Wow. No, it's a combination of all of those. First of all, the microphone is going to hear the drum. So it starts at the drum. So you have to make sure, you have to be aware of, I was hyper aware of like what heads would do, what thickness of shells would do, what die cast hoops would do. I mean, I studied all that. I used to take my drums apart and put them back together, just to try different things, So I experimented a lot on my downtime. Obviously, you're not going to do that in the studio. But that, conversely, when I got into a creative moment where they needed something, I pretty much could figure out how to get it out of my drums. And if your drum sounds like that, then the microphone is going to read that. But, the sophistication of that's available to you in the studio, especially a big studio, the best mics, the best outboard gear, the best boards, the best, studio tape machines are great tape. So there's a lot to be said for tape compression. We were hitting it hard, and then putting it away, and then bringing it back to mix. So.
And great engineers. Maybe you said that.
Phenomenal. I mean, the guys the engineers I work with the best guys in the world. It's a big world, but it certainly recognizes as being giants. I mean, Peter Coleman, phenomenal. George Tucko, phenomenal. I could get on and on and on, and I don't want to start doing that because I don't want to leave anybody out. But God bless you all, because you all helped me. And if you're listening to a record, you're not just listening to the band. You're listening to the people that contributed to that product artistically. And the guys that aren't recognized enough probably are the engineers. I mean, producers get, a fair amount of recognition, but engineers get, you don't realize, what that guy does. And that guy does a lot. He does all the groundwork.
Yeah.
Like a cinematographer for a movie, you go.
Yeah. I want to just jump back for 1 second, Myron, before I forget this thought. When you mentioned Shadows of the Night and you talk about the drum sound. To me, the sound you got on that song, I mean, it was like, they sound like, because the song's about, I think of the video where it's like it's a battle scene, in a war, and you're flying in the plane. I know that's not your. I know that's not your.
I got a lot of fan letters from Germany. I mean, a lot of girls in Lederhosen, they dug that video.
They loved it. No, I remember you telling me that was not your happiest moment, but.
No. I tell my kids that I was on drugs. I wasn't, but I tell them I was. They see that big, I go, well, I had a drug habit. I would never sober. I would never do that. It's a lie.
No, I was just going to say, but the tom-toms in that song sound like explosions. I mean, they complement what's happening in that song so perfectly. It's like, and that's a great example of what you're talking about, where you wanted that sound. I mean, listen to that.
And that's me and Peter Coleman, spending an extra hour in the studio before everybody gets in, and tweaking that out to where what I heard in my head, we're hitting the tape with, so when everybody walked in, that was just there, let's do this. And that carried the day pretty much.
Were the drums really detuned, Myron? Would you have them did they sound like they're
tuned very low, but they're not detuned.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no tap in them. No, I mean, they were resonant, very resonant.
Yeah. They're so big sounding, man.
They're huge. Yeah, I know. It's great.
I'm going to listen to it when we're done. I'm going to put that song on. It's so great.
Cool. Yeah.
This is a great question coming up right here from Kelly King. First of all, I'm going to skip that for a second. Neil Andrew Terry just says, Myron is on my, quote, because of him, I started drumming list. And I just thought that was great because
I'd love to hear that. That's great.
That's beautiful, man. I mean, we have our heroes like Ringo and, people
Charlie
like that
Watts.
That got us, Charlie Watts, and that's beautiful. But
I got
Kelly
a Charlie
King
Watts
has
story I got to tell you.
Oh yeah, I get it. Well,
before I became a drummer, go ahead. Let me hear yours. I'll tell you what.
I'm gonna do this Kelly King question because I think you'll like it.
I hope I know the answer.
First of all, Myron is insanely brilliant. Thank you for so many years of inspiration. Secondly, who would win an arm wrestling match between Myron and Kenny Aronoff?
That'd be a tough one.
I put my money on you.
I'm back in shape, baby. So Aronoff's a monster. We used to actually go at each other when we see each other. And if one guy saw the other guy first, you had the advantage because you could come in lower.
Yeah.
And we would actually wrestle each other from time to time. I love him. What a phenomenal drummer he is.
Yeah.
And we got a lot in common in terms of we just have a lot in common. I mean, we played around the same time with some of the same people,
Yeah.
And
I've been tackled by Kenny full charge and a tackle, So I used to wrestle in high school. I could hold my own if we got an even start, like you said, but he'd get the jump. He'd just
if he gets lower than you, you're up, you're in the air, baby. That's it.
Yeah.
He's going to dead pressure.
I want to hear the Charlie story, but one quick thing I'm going to mention. I don't know if you remember this. This would have been 30 years ago. I was out in LA on a trip, and we'd always get together, you and I, and we went to an Italian restaurant in Woodland Hills that you used to go to all the time. It was a place that you and Monica, it was like a family spot that you guys knew of. You selected it. And I said, well, Kenny's, I told Kenny I'd have dinner, oh yeah, have Kenny come. So we go to this really nice restaurant with the white tablecloths, really, the maitre d', the owner. And Kenny, every other word out of his mouth was F this and and people are that like your neighbors are like at the next table looking like going like and you finally I give you huge kudos for this. You finally said, Kenny, I know these people. I know this is our favorite restaurant. Can you please? And he went, oh shit, sorry. Oh, Myron.
Oh fuck, I won't do it again.
Anyway, we love Kenny. We love Kenny.
He's the best. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Let's hear the Charlie story.
Okay, so it's about 1965, 66, 67, I don't know, one of those years. And I'm not playing the drums, but I'm with my mother, and I'm going shopping with her, and WHOT is on. And there was channel, the AM radio, there's no FM. So AM radio that would sometimes play a good song every now and then. You know, you get a Beatles song or something. And all of a sudden, I hear this weird sound coming on. And I recognize it because at one point in time, my mother sold Indian products. So I actually was familiar with the sound of a sitar in Youngstown, Ohio. So there's a sitar. And I hear this line, then it was like, it was like an electrifying moment, you know, and then Jagger comes in with that. And I knew that in that 1 second, I knew I was never going to finish high school. I said, this is it. I'm doing that. And so that was, you know, that kind of pushed me over the edge. But Painted Black totally was where I was at mentally. In fact, in a lot of ways, I was more of an Animals fan than a Beatles fan because we got to get out of this place. All these songs, that's kind of how I felt, you know?
Yeah. Yep. That's great, man. Charlie, we played that song last night. It's
so great. I mean, everything he did was the right thing to do. You know what I mean? Like in hindsight, you listen to it, you go, and the wobbly bits that were on there.
Oh, I know.
Pure danger. You know what I mean? It's like if it was getting too safe, all of a sudden he would make it dangerous again. And that would pull you in as a listener. All of a sudden he would just, whoop, you know, and then bam, you go, oh my God. You forgot how good it could be.
I know, you know, when I started playing again with this band I'm in now, I was on the phone with him one time. We were doing that song and I said, Charlie, can I just ask you a question about Painted Black? And I said, I'm just having a hard time, you know, like getting the right feel. Are you playing quarter notes or eighth notes on the tom-tom or something? And he said, oh God, it's a simple song to play. It's not hard. He said, just don't play it too fast. And I just thought, you know, like it was classic Charlie. He's like,
exactly right.
He was exasperated with the idea. I'm like, you know, but was it because he like switches from sort of quarter notes to eighth notes, you know?
Yeah. Well, some of it I think is the rebound. You know, I mean, it's that technique where you hit and pull, but it's not. It's like a push pull, but it's not really. You know what I mean? It's like a half push pull thing. And it gets that boomba, 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 boomba thing going.
Right. Yeah. And he, as you can imagine, Myron, he loved questions like that. He lived for questions like
Absolutely.
that.
Like he couldn't remember what he played. It's just just play it. You know.
Yeah. Don't play it. Just don't play it too fast. Yeah.
Don't play it too fast. And lift your right hand and hit your snare. You know.
Oh man, missed that guy. Yeah. All right, this is the last question I'm gonna ask you, and it's a really good one from Heidi Vertaler. I don't know if you know, she said, when I first met Neil on the producers panel at the New Music Seminar in New York in 1986, he said, go for the 4th of July finale sound, exaggerate everything. It's pretty cool. It's kind of it's reminiscent of what you're talking about.
Right.
And then he said, rehearsing and working everything out in the studio tends to make the sound less fresh and crisp. So her question to you is, what were your experiences of this approach? And what would your advice be for a producer or anyone getting their start in the music community?
Okay, well, that's kind of a multifaceted question because it's predicated on what level the band is on that you're working with.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. In other words, if you're working with a young band, you're better off doing more pre-production than you. So when you hit the studio, you have a clear vision of what the songs are going to be, the parts and how they're going to sound relative, you know, and then you're honing the sound and finalizing the arrangement and looking for the definitive performance. With a band that's been around a while, it's different. What you want to do is get them into a creative situation where spontaneity and truth comes through. You know what I mean? They've already established who they are. So maybe they want a different version of what they are. And you can influence that subtly in terms of sound and things like that. You know, usually it's the things you take away, you know, and then reintroduce a different element later on. So it really depends on what you're trying to get. you know, and the type of record that you're trying to make. You know, Mike Chapman, who I worked with a bunch, was great because he would make super exciting sounding records. And when we did Invincible,
great.
I was just screwing around with it. You know, we had never played the song. So I heard it and I was just trying things. We did 2 run-throughs to actually learn the song. And at the end of the second run-through, I said, okay, I'm ready to go. He goes, I got it. I go, what? I said, no, I know what I want to play. He goes, I got it. You're done. And he did. I mean, it was the first take and the bridge he cut from the second take. You know, because I think I stopped playing and was thinking of, you know, fixing my hi-hat or something. I don't know what I did. but he, you know, and they were, and he was right. Like when I hear that track, I go, well, for what we were trying to do, which was like an exciting, energetic, hard-sounding track, that snare drum, you know.
Oh my God!
Just, you know, that's Invincible, my main drum. You know, I've used on everything, but that he took that sound to another level. You know, and that was Tucko with him. You know, George Tucko. Yeah,
that was my lead-in question when I first met you at Simmons in 1985. That song was on the radio, and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And he went, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, what?" And I said, "What was the snare drum you used on Invincible?" And you said, "The Invincible snare." It was great. It was. I'll never forget it. 40 years later,
that was my Billy Cobham moment with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
No, but and I wanted to. I had made a note about John Aldridge, and we talked about this once before.
Engraved the drum. Yeah.
And that was one of the prototypes you mentioned, right? One of the Ludwig, like a Black Beauty sort of prototype.
Well, no, that was it was the prototype for what became their brass snare.
Oh, right. Yeah. Brass snare.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry,
yeah. The Black Beauties were brass too, but they were black. This one is, you know, natural finish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And John engraved it for you.
6.5. John, amazing job engraving it. You know, he's the guy's a true artist. So he's an amazing drum guy. I mean, he knows a lot about drums. You know.
Yep.
He's an asset to us.
He's a great guy and a funny man too.
He's funny, yeah.
He's a very great sarcastic sense of humor. Yeah, I love him.
He's good. When we were on tour with Ario, he was, you know, I would see him every day, and he's just a funny guy. You know, look forward to seeing him.
Well, that drum, I want to say recently, I don't know who I was talking to. Gosh, I'm sorry, I can't. But someone told me that they based a sound on a record that they have off that. Like they told the engineer, I want the sound that Myron had on Invincible for my. Maybe it was Greg. Maybe it was Greg talking about wanting that sound for the David Lee Roth record. I think that might have been it.
I love Greg. Greg, you know, Greg and I are like, he's like a little brother to me, you know, so at different times, I would just, you know, you want to use that? Yeah. You know, and I've done that with my other friends too, but, you know, it doesn't matter. But Chapman, you know, sampled that snare, and then he would use it on everything. And and he was so deaf, you know, that he would have the speaker so loud. So I come into Ocean Way and I'm doing a session, and I stop and I listen. And there was Mike Chapman working here. He said, because I could hear it. It was that loud. And I open it, it's deafening, you know, and the both of them are looking over at me and their faces are red because, you know, that's my snare drum. I go, is that my snare drum? And Chapman goes, it's our snare drum. It's pretty funny. Yeah. I got a funny story about Chapman. We're doing a Lita Ford record, the first one. Lita, and we're in the Two Brothers studio, the Robb Brothers. What's the name of it? Oh man, it slips in my mind for a second. But we're in the studio that we used a lot, and it'll come to me as I'm talking. And Chapman's complaining: "His speakers are not loud enough. They're not loud enough. There's something wrong with them. I need other speakers." So they bring in bigger speakers. So he goes, "Still not enough." Me and Tucko are looking at each other. Now, Tucko's wearing those things that people land planes with. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he's about ready to get the second one and put it over there, too. So they bring him more amplifiers. So we're listening to a playback, and I think it was "You Can't Catch Me," which is an insane drum track. Okay, and he's got it cranked beyond belief. All of a sudden, Taco taps me on the shoulder, and he goes like this, and I look over, and the speaker's on fire. So he grabs a thing, and he's filming the speaker that's on fire. Okay, so I run to get a fire extinguisher, and he caught the speakers on fire, and he still wasn't loud enough. And I said, God, I love this guy. You know, I mean, there's no more, and he wants more. So,
yeah.
And he's capable of it. Oh, he was fantastic. Yeah. Was great.
Man.
Yeah. And his record's quite a band.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad I wanted to touch on Invincible. I feel like I always bring that up, but there's so many great songs. Thank you for doing this today. This is
Johnny, thanks for having me, man. You know.
Oh, awesome. You're the best, Tyrone.
All the love to you, my friend.
All the love to you too, brother. Hang with me if you would for 1 second, and we'll end the live stream. Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Big hand for Myron Grombacher. Man, the great, the legendary, mighty Tyrone. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to your questions. I know tons of people were posting stuff, but yeah, we could keep Myron here all day. So thank you, Myron, for doing this.
My pleasure.